A beautiful bank worker with a heart of stone just made the biggest mistake of her life. She looked down at the old manual wheelchair, disgusted by the faded gray cardigan, and ordered security to throw the helpless woman out like garbage. But before the guards could touch her, a quiet young man stepped in. He wasn't wearing a fancy suit, just a simple hoodie and sneakers. The arrogant staff laughed, completely unaware that this ordinary man held a secret that could destroy her entire career in seconds. What happens next will leave you in tears. Hit that subscribe button right now for... Also, justice has no color, whether you are white or black. Drop a comment below and let me know, what city or country are you watching this from? The morning sun hit the towering glass facade of the Metropolitan Bank, creating a brilliant, blinding reflection on the busy streets of downtown. Inside the main lobby, the atmosphere was thick with the sharp scent of expensive polished wood, fresh marble cleaner, and coffee. High ceilings amplified the clicking sound of leather shoes on the glossy floor, while a low, continuous murmur of financial transactions filled the air. This place was a temple of wealth, designed to make those who possessed fortune feel powerful.
Ow!
And those who did not feel completely invisible. It was a fast-paced environment where every second was calculated, and every person was instantly judged by the clothes they wore, the watch on their wrist, or the shoes on their feet. Amid this sea of sharp tailored suits and expensive designer dresses, an elderly woman sat quietly near the corner of the waiting area. Her name was Norma. She was 57 years old, and she sat in a simple, manual wheelchair that had seen much better days. The metal frame of her wheelchair was slightly faded, and the rubber on the wheels was visibly worn down from long walks on rough city pavements. Norma herself wore an oversized, faded gray cardigan that looked as though it had been washed 100 times. Her long skirt was plain, and her shoes were simple flat slip-ons meant for comfort rather than style. In her lap, her frail, wrinkled hands firmly held an old, scratched black leather folder. The folder was thick with papers, its edges frayed from years of use. Norma did not look like she belonged in this grand building. To any passerby, she looked like someone who had wandered in from the cold streets just to find a place to rest. Her face bore the deep lines of a long, hard life, but her eyes remained remarkably calm and gentle. She did not look around with panic or shame. Instead, she watched the busy movement of the bank with a quiet, patient observation. Occasionally, a wealthy client would walk past her, quickly pulling their expensive coats closer to their bodies, as if catching a disease just by standing near her wheelchair. Norma simply offered them a soft, polite smile, which was almost always met with cold silence or a quick look of disgust. She remained completely undisturbed by their coldness, adjusting her old leather folder securely on her lap. Outside, the city continued its loud, chaotic rush, but inside, Norma's world was slow and measured. She had arrived early, navigating the heavy glass doors with quiet effort before parking her wheelchair in the designated waiting line. Her presence was a stark contrast to the modern, high-tech surrounding of the bank. While others stared at their latest smartphones with anxious expressions, Norma simply looked ahead, her breathing steady and peaceful. Her simple clothes and old wheelchair told a story of poverty to anyone whose superficiality judged her. Yet there was an undeniable dignity in the way she carried herself. She sat up straight, her shoulders relaxed, waiting patiently for her turn to approach the service desks. She was a woman completely alone in a crowd of wealthy strangers, a quiet soul in a loud world of money, completely unaware of the storm that her simple presence was about to cause in this grand institution of wealth. Across the polished marble floor sat Luna, the bank's head customer service agent. At 34 years old, Luna was undeniably stunning. She had flawless fair skin, perfectly styled hair, and wore a sharp, custom-tailored navy blue suit that accentuated her professional authority. To the wealthy clients of the Metropolitan Bank, Luna was the absolute definition of grace and efficiency. Right now, she was assisting a man in an expensive designer suit. Luna listened to him with a wide, enthusiastic smile, laughing softly at his jokes and nodding with deep respect. She quickly processed his large transaction, handed him his platinum card, and wished him a wonderful day with a warm, melodic voice. This was her normal routine, a flawless performance of high-class service that she delivered every single day. However, this beautiful surface hid a very fragile reality. The bank's prestigious reputation depended entirely on maintaining an illusion of exclusive luxury. and Luna was the strict gatekeeper of that illusion. For her, human value was measured solely by a person's outward appearance and their bank balance. As the wealthy businessman walked away, Luna's eyes scanned the lobby, and her bright, welcoming smile instantly vanished. Her gaze locked onto the corner of the waiting area, where Norma sat quietly in her faded gray cardigan and worn-out manual wheelchair. Luna's fair skin flushed slightly with sudden irritation. She pressed a button on her desk to call the next customer, but her eyes never left the elderly woman. To Luna, Norma was an eyesore, an unwanted stain on the pristine, luxurious image of the bank lobby. She could not understand how security had even allowed someone who looked so poor to pass through the heavy glass doors. Norma, completely unaware of the growing hostility directed toward her, looked up at the electronic display board. The screen blinked, changing the ticket number to 35. Norma looked down at the small paper slip in her hand. It matched. She let out a soft, nervous breath and gently adjusted the heavy, scratched black leather folder on her lap. Her fingers tightened around the frayed edges of the old folder. While her face remained calm, a slight tremor in her hands showed a hidden layer of anxiety. She knew she looked out of place here. She could feel the cold, judging stares of the people around her, and she could clearly see the sharp change in Luna's expression from across the room. Luna watched as Norma began to manually push the wheels of her old wheelchair forward. Every push seemed to require an effort, and the old metal frame made a faint, rhythmic squeaking sound against the silent, expensive marble floor. That tiny sound seemed to grate on Luna's nerves. She adjusted her posture, her body stiffening as the elderly woman approached her pristine mahogany desk. Luna did not arrange her papers or prepare a welcoming greeting. Instead, she crossed her arms tightly, her beautiful face hardening into a mask of pure coldness. The fragile peace in the lobby was about to break, and the tiny signs of prejudice that usually remained hidden beneath polite corporate smiles were rapidly rising to the surface. Norma finally stopped her manual wheelchair right in front of the pristine mahogany desk. She looked up at the head customer service agent, offering a gentle, polite smile. She opened her mouth to speak, but before a single word could leave her lips, Luna slammed a heavy plastic sign onto the desk. The sharp sound echoed across the quiet lobby, causing several nearby customers to turn their heads. Luna did not say hello. She did not ask how she could help. Instead, she leaned forward, her beautiful eyes narrowing with deep disgust as she looked down at Norma's faded gray cardigan and the worn-out rubber wheels of her chair. She spoke in a loud, harsh voice that was completely different from the sweet, melodic tone she had used with the wealthy businessman just moments before. She told Norma that the bank did not allow beggars inside, instructing her to leave immediately because she was bothering the actual clients who had real business to conduct. The words were incredibly sharp and cruel, cutting through the silence of the room.
Oh, no.
Norma's polite smile instantly froze on her face. Her cheeks flushed with sudden warmth, and her grip tightened around the scratched black leather folder in her lap until her knuckles turned white. She explained softly that she was not a beggar and had an important matter to discuss regarding a major account. Hearing this, Luna let out a loud, mocking laugh that filled the entire service area. She asked Norma what kind of account a woman in a broken wheelchair could possibly have, suggesting it might be an account for collecting pennies on the street corner. She told Norma that her presence was ruining the luxurious environment of the Metropolitan Bank and making the high-class clients uncomfortable. Luna's voice grew louder and more aggressive with every word, deliberately ensuring that everyone in the lobby could hear the humiliation. She stated that people like Norma did not belong in a prestigious financial institution and belonged on the sidewalk outside. Norma sat completely still under the wave of insults, her body trembling slightly. She tried to raise the old leather folder, offering to show the documents inside to prove her words, but Luna did not even look at it. With a swift, arrogant wave of her hand, Luna swiped at the air, knocking the corner of the folder so hard that it nearly slipped from Norma's frail hands. Luna yelled for security, stating she wanted this dirty woman out of her sight immediately. The public humiliation was absolute. The entire bank lobby grew dead silent as wealthy clients watched the scene, some with indifferent expressions and others with quiet amusement. Luna stood up from her chair, towering over the elderly woman, her face twisted in a mask of elitist anger.
Out!
She had completely crossed the line from a professional worker to a cruel bully. utterly convinced that her beauty and her position gave her the right to strip away the dignity of a helpless, elderly woman who appeared to have nothing. Norma felt a heavy, suffocating weight press down on her chest. The public humiliation was like a physical blow, leaving her completely breathless. She did not scream, she did not yell back, and she did not cause a scene. Instead, large silent tears began to well up in her gentle eyes, blurring her vision of the beautiful, angry woman standing over her. One by one, the tears rolled down the deep lines of her wrinkled cheeks, dripping onto the faded gray fabric of her old cardigan. Her breath came in short, shaky gasps as she tried to maintain whatever small piece of dignity she had left. She looked around the grand lobby, searching for a single sympathetic face among the crowd of wealthy strangers. But nobody stood up for her. The rich clients simply stared with cold, detached curiosity, while others looked away entirely, pretending that the heartbreaking scene in front of them was not happening. This collective indifference hurt Norma even more than Luna's sharp words. She felt completely stripped of her humanity, reduced to nothing more than an annoying obstacle in a beautiful building. With a trembling hand, she reached down to hold the scratched black leather folder closer to her chest, hugging it tightly like a shield against the cruelty of the world. She whispered softly, asking why Luna had to be so unkind when she was only trying to do her job. But Luna showed absolutely no remorse. Seeing the elderly woman cry did not soften her heart at all. Instead, it only made her more impatient and annoyed. She rolled her eyes dramatically and let out a loud, frustrated sigh, crossing her arms tightly over her expensive navy blue suit. She told Norma that crying would not work here, emphasizing that the bank operated on money and rules, not on cheap pity or tears. Two large security guards in dark uniforms quickly marched across the marble floor, their heavy boots making a loud, intimidating sound that echoed through the silent room. They stopped on either side of the manual wheelchair, looking down at Norma with stern, unyielding expressions. Luna pointed a sharp, perfectly manicured finger toward the heavy glass exit doors, ordering the guards to take the woman and her old chair out to the sidewalk where they belonged. Norma shook her head weakly, her frail body trembling with a mixture of intense fear, deep shame, and utter confusion. She had spent her entire life believing that goodness and respect were things given to every human being, regardless of their status. But in this temple of wealth, surrounded by polished marble and expensive suits, she realized how wrong she was. The sheer weight of the humiliation made her feel incredibly small. As the guards reached down to grab the cold metal handles of her wheelchair, Norma closed her eyes tightly, letting out a soft, broken sob, feeling completely helpless against a system that valued a bank balance far more than human decency. "Take your hands off my mother." The voice was not loud, but it possessed a cold, commanding stillness that sliced right through the tension in the room. The two large security guards instantly froze, their hands hovering just inches away from the manual wheelchair. Luna blinked, her arrogant expression faltering for a split second as she looked up toward the heavy glass entrance doors. A young man was walking briskly across the polished marble floor. His name was Ifans. At 30 years old, he had a quiet, intensely observant presence. He wore a plain, oversized black hoodie that looked somewhat faded, a pair of regular blue jeans, and simple, unbranded sneakers. He looked entirely ordinary, dressing in a way that completely hid his true identity from the world. He carried no expensive briefcase, wore no luxury watch, and possessed none of the flashy items that the people in this bank used to measure success. Yet there was an unmistakable strength in his stride, a calm confidence that made the crowded lobby feel suddenly very small. Ifans walked directly past the guards, completely ignoring their intimidating size, and knelt down on the hard floor right next to the worn-out wheelchair. The moment he saw the wet tracks of tears on Norma's wrinkled cheeks and the trembling of her frail hands, his eyes darkened with a quiet, fierce anger. However, when he spoke to his mother, his voice became incredibly soft and filled with deep devotion. He gently placed his hands over her white-knuckled grip on the scratched black leather folder, asking her if she was all right and telling her that he was here now. Norma opened her eyes, letting out a long, shaky breath of pure relief as she looked at her son. She did not want him to get into trouble or become the target of the bank's cruelty, so she weakly tried to pull his sleeve, whispering that they should just leave the building. She told him that she was fine and that they did not belong in a place like this. Ifans gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb, his expression softening to reassure her. He stood up to his full height, turning slowly to face the head customer service agent. The contrast between them was absolute. Luna, standing proudly in her custom-tailored navy blue suit behind her luxury mahogany desk, and Effens, standing protectively in front of an old manual wheelchair wearing a simple hoodie. Luna recovered her composure quickly, looking Ifans up and down with an immediate expression of deep amusement and scorn. She let out a short, sarcastic chuckle, assuming that this simply dressed young man was just another poor person from the same world as the elderly woman. She adjusted her posture, looking down her nose at him, completely unaware that the man standing before her in plain clothes was about to change the entire course of her life. She folded her arms tightly, ready to dismiss both of them as nothing more than an inconvenient waste of her valuable time. "I believe you owe my mother an apology," Ifan said, his voice dropping into a dangerously calm tone. He stood perfectly still, his eyes locked onto the head customer service agent. Luna stared at him for a moment, utterly shocked by his audacity, before her face twisted into a look of absolute mockery. She let out a loud, sharp laugh that echoed off the high glass walls of the lobby. She asked Ifans, who he thought he was, to demand anything from her, pointing a sharp finger at his plain black hoodie and faded jeans. She told him that people who dressed like beggars did not get to make demands in a prestigious financial institution like the Metropolitan Bank. She stated firmly that she would never apologize to a woman who belonged on the sidewalk, adding that both of them were currently trespassing on private property and ruining the atmosphere for the bank's actual, high-class clients. Ifans did not flinch, nor did he raise his voice. He simply stepped closer to the mahogany desk, keeping his body positioned protectively in front of Norma's wheelchair. He told Luna that a uniform and a fancy desk did not give her the right to strip away a person's dignity, reminding her that respect is a basic human right, not a luxury reserved only for the wealthy. This response only infuriated Luna further. Her fair skin turned a deep, angry red as she slammed her hand down on the desk for a second time. She shouted that she was the head customer service agent, and her job was to protect the bank from people who brought nothing but dirt and trouble into the lobby. She turned her attention back to the two large security guards, screaming at them to stop standing around like statues and to throw both Ifans and his mother out into the street immediately. She threatened to have them permanently blacklisted from every single branch of the bank in the country, ensuring they could never step foot inside a financial institution again. Norma's small hand reached out from her wheelchair, her fingers trembling as she grabbed the edge of Effens's hoodie. She tugged it weakly, her voice breaking as she pleaded with him to stop, saying that it wasn't worth it and that they should just go home before things became even worse. The wealthy customers around them continued to whisper, pointing at Effens's simple sneakers and shaking their heads in disapproval, fully agreeing with Luna that these ordinary people did not belong in their exclusive world. Instead of calling for backup, the main security guard hesitated, sensing an unusual intensity in Effens's quiet gaze. Seeing this hesitation, Luna grabbed her desk phone in a rage. She dialed a 3-digit extension, her voice shaking with anger as she spoke into the receiver. She called for the branch manager to come down to the lobby immediately, stating that there was a major security disruption caused by a pair of aggressive, poor individuals who refused to leave the premises. She slammed the phone down, looking at Ifans with a triumphant, malicious smile, fully confident that the highest authority in the building would put this arrogant young man and his crippled mother in their rightful place. Within less than 2 minutes, the heavy wooden doors of the executive suite swung open, and the branch manager marched into the lobby. He was a middle-aged man wearing an impeccably tailored 3-piece suit, an expensive gold watch that glinted under the chandeliers, and a pair of perfectly shined Italian leather shoes. His facial expression was cold and severe as he walked past the whispering crowd of wealthy clients, heading straight toward the commotion at Luna's desk. Luna immediately stood up, her previous anger instantly melting into a polite, professional, and slightly victimized tone. She pointed at Norma in her faded manual wheelchair, and then at Ifans in his plain black hoodie, explaining to the manager that these individuals had entered the bank without any proper identification or business. She claimed that the elderly woman was causing a scene, and when she politely asked them to leave to preserve the comfort of their elite clients, the young man became aggressive, insulted her, and refused to follow the bank's security protocols. The branch manager looked down his nose at Ifans and Norma, his eyes lingering with heavy disapproval on their simple clothes and the worn-out rubber wheels of the chair. He did not bother to ask for their side of the story. For him, the math was incredibly simple. The people in expensive suits brought millions into his branch, while the people in faded hoodies brought nothing but a bad image. He spoke in a loud, authoritarian voice, stating that the Metropolitan Bank was an exclusive establishment reserved for serious financial matters. He told Effens that his behavior was entirely unacceptable, and if they did not leave the premises within the next 10 seconds, he would personally ensure that the police arrived to arrest them for criminal trespassing and disturbing the peace. Norma felt her heart completely sink into her chest. The threat of the police and the absolute certainty of the manager's judgment made her feel utterly crushed. She looked down at her lap, her frail shoulders shaking as a fresh wave of hot tears spilled over her eyelids, dripping onto the scratched black leather folder. She felt an overwhelming sense of guilt, believing that her desire to hand-deliver the papers had brought this terrible shame and danger upon her beloved son. She reached out with a weak, trembling hand, her fingers gripping Effens's wrist with all the strength she could muster, begging him through broken sobs to please just drop the matter and take her away before things became any worse. The wealthy customers in the lobby began to shake their heads, whispering that this was exactly what happened when poor people tried to cause trouble in places where they did not belong. Luna stood proudly beside the manager, her arms crossed over her navy blue suit, a cold, victorious smirk plastered across her fair face as she watched the elderly woman cry. Every single ounce of hope seemed to vanish from the corner of the room. They were completely surrounded by a wall of wealth, power, and cruel indifference, facing a system that was actively preparing to discard them like garbage onto the cold city sidewalk outside, leaving them at the absolute lowest point of their public humiliation. Ifans felt his mother's trembling fingers gripping his wrist, her broken sobs cutting straight through his heart. He looked down at her frail form, taking a deep, steady breath that seemed to clear all the tension from his face. The anger in his eyes vanished, replaced by an unsettling, absolute calmness. He gently patted Norma's hand, whispering to her that everything was going to be all right and that she would never have to cry in this place again. Slowly, Ifans turned back to face the branch manager and Luna. He did not yell, he did not make a scene, and he did not show a single trace of fear. Instead, he reached into the front pocket of his plain black hoodie and pulled out a simple, unbranded smartphone with a cracked screen. To the manager and Luna, the cheap phone was just further proof of his low status. They watched with impatient sneers as Ifans tapped the screen and placed the phone to his ear. The entire lobby remained dead silent, waiting to see what this ordinary young man in regular blue jeans could possibly do. When the call connected, Ifans spoke in a clear, flat voice that carried across the quiet room. He did not introduce himself. He simply uttered a single, heavy sentence, instructing the person on the other end to execute the final directive immediately because the environment at the Metropolitan Bank was entirely unacceptable. Luna let out a sharp, mocking chuckle, shaking her head dramatically as she whispered to the manager that the young man was clearly losing his mind and trying to bluff his way out of trouble. The branch manager checked his expensive gold watch with an annoyed sigh, raising his hand to signal the two large security guards to finally grab the manual wheelchair and push it out the door. But before the guards could take a single step forward, a sudden loud sound shattered the corporate peace of the building. Every single desktop computer behind the service counters began to beep rapidly in perfect unison. Red notification banners flashed across the monitors, and the main printers behind Luna's desk instantly began spitting out pages of urgent financial documents at high speed. A second later, the branch manager's phone in his inside suit pocket began to vibrate violently, followed immediately by Luna's desk phone ringing with a loud, piercing tone. The manager frowns, his arrogant expression faltering as he pulled out his phone. The screen displayed the private number of the bank's global board of directors. His hands began to shake slightly as he answered, pressing the device to his ear. Within 3 seconds of listening, every ounce of color completely drained from the manager's face, leaving him pale and wide-eyed. He looked up from the phone, his gaze moving slowly from the screen to Ifans, his mouth hanging slightly open in absolute shock. Luna's smile froze instantly as she watched her boss's sudden terror. The atmosphere in the grand lobby shifted in a single heartbeat, the heavy silence returning as everyone realized that the simple call made by the young man in the faded hoodie had just triggered a massive, uncontrollable shockwave through the entire financial institution. The branch manager's phone slipped from his trembling fingers, clattering loudly against the polished marble floor. He stared at Evans, his knees shaking violently under his tailored three-piece suit. Luna's breath hitched in her throat as she watched her boss fall to his knees, desperately picking up his phone. She demanded to know what was happening, her beautiful face tightening with a sudden, sharp panic. The manager looked up, his voice cracking as he whispered that the global investment firm had just officially finalized the emergency acquisition of 51% of the bank's total shares, and the billionaire founder of that firm was standing right in front of them. Everyone in the bank lobby gasped in absolute disbelief. The wealthy clients looked at Evans, their eyes wide with shock. They thought Evans was just a poor, protective son trying to bluff his way out of a humiliating situation. They assumed his plain black hoodie, regular blue jeans, and cracked smartphone were the signs of a man with nothing to his name. It turned out that Evans was actually the brilliant, low-profile billionaire founder of the global investment firm that had bought the controlling shares of the bank that very morning, making him Luna and the manager's ultimate boss. His simple clothing was not a sign of poverty, but a personal choice to live humbly and away from the shallow spotlight of high society. Because since the beginning, Norma had not come to the bank to beg for pennies or to open a small savings account. She was carrying the official, legally binding acquisition documents inside the scratched black leather folder on her lap to hand-deliver them directly to the executive office. She had intentionally dressed in her old, washed-out gray cardigan and used her faded manual wheelchair because she wanted to see firsthand how the bank staff treated regular, everyday people when they thought nobody important was watching. The clues had been there all along. Her absolute calmness and lack of shame in the sea of wealthy strangers. Her tight and protective grip on the old folder, as if it held something far more valuable than cash. And Evans's immediate appearance without any expensive car but with a commanding presence that could halt security guards with a single sentence. Luna felt the room spinning around her. She looked at the scratched leather folder in Norma's lap, realizing that the very papers she had tried to knock away were the documents that dictated her entire future. Her fair skin turned completely pale as she realized the horrifying truth. The elderly woman she had insulted, degraded, and tried to throw out onto the street like garbage was actually the mother of the man who now owned the entire institution. Her elitist pride shattered into a million pieces, leaving her standing behind her luxury mahogany desk, entirely exposed, ruined, and paralyzed by the devastating weight of her own cruel prejudice. The silence in the grand lobby of the Metropolitan Bank was absolute. Nobody whispered, nobody pointed, and none of the wealthy clients dared to look Evans in the eye. The branch manager scrambled to his feet, his hands shaking as he bowed repeatedly, stammering apologies and begging for mercy. Luna stood frozen behind her desk, tears of pure terror and shame streaming down her flawless fair cheeks. Her previous arrogance completely shattered. Evans did not raise his voice, nor did he display any theatrical anger. He simply looked at the branch manager and stated that leadership starts from the top, and by choosing to support cruelty over basic human decency, the manager had proven he was unfit to lead. Evans then turned his cold, sharp gaze to Luna. He told her that her employment with the Metropolitan Bank was terminated effective immediately. She would be blacklisted from working in any financial institution under his firm's global network. He added that her beauty and her sharp suit could not hide the ugliness of her character. Luna sank into her chair, burying her face in her hands, as the reality of her total ruin set in. The very security guard she had ordered to throw Norma out now stepped forward, firmly instructing Luna and the manager to pack their personal belongings and leave the building. Evans knelt back down beside the manual wheelchair. His expression instantly softened, replacing the cold billionaire persona with the warmth of a devoted son. He gently took the scratched black leather folder from Norma's lap and kissed her forehead, telling her that it was time to go home. Norma looked at her son, her gentle eyes still wet with tears, but her face was filled with a quiet, profound pride. She gave him a soft nod, her heart finally at peace. As Evans slowly pushed the worn-out manual wheelchair toward the heavy glass exit doors, The entire bank lobby watched them in breathless reverence. The squeaking sound of the old rubber wheels against the expensive marble floor no longer sounded like an annoyance. It sounded like a powerful lesson in humility. The wealthy clients who had previously looked away in indifference now stood straight, looking down at the floor in deep shame for their own silent prejudice. They stepped out into the warm afternoon sun, leaving the cold, superficial world of money behind them. Fans helped his mother into a regular, unpretentious car parked by the curb, treating her with the absolute highest level of honor and respect. The story of the elderly woman in the faded gray cardigan left a permanent mark on the grand institution. It served as a stark, unforgettable reminder to everyone that true value is never found in a bank balance, a luxury watch, or a custom-tailored suit. Wealth can buy status, power, and influence, but it can never buy character, integrity, or grace. Human dignity is an absolute right that belongs to every single person, regardless of their outward appearance. In a world that is often blinded by the glittering illusion of money, the most valuable asset a human being can ever possess is a kind heart, a humble spirit, and the willingness to treat every soul with equal respect.